What is the true nature of justice? Is it a carefully weighed decision, born of logic and evidence, or is it, at its terrifying core, merely a roll of the dice? We like to believe that the universe is orderly, that virtue is rewarded and vice is punished. But there are places in the geography of the human imagination where order surrenders to chaos, and where a man's destiny hangs not on his actions, but on the whim of pure, blind chance. Imagine, if you will, a vast amphitheater under a scorching sun. The air is thick with the smell of dust, sweat, and anticipation. Thousands of eyes are fixed upon a single point in the sand. There is no judge, there is no jury, there is only a man, standing alone, and before him, two heavy, wooden doors. Behind one lies absolute ecstasy, behind the other, immediate, violent annihilation, and the choice is his alone. This is the setting of the story we are about to embark upon. It is not merely a tale of ancient times. It is a psychological labyrinth that forces us to confront the darkness within our own hearts. It asks us a question that has haunted readers for over a century, a question not of logic, but of passion. Welcome to the world of Frank Richard Stockton's masterpiece, The Lady or the Tiger. To understand the horror of this situation, one must first understand the mind that designed it. We are transported to a kingdom of the very olden time, ruled by a king described as, quote, semi-barbaric. Note that word, semi-barbaric. He possesses the polished veneer of civilization, the Latin ideas of progress, but beneath that thin crust lies a soul of large, florid, and untrammeled savagery. He is a man who turns fancies into facts, and his greatest fancy is his method of administering justice. In this kingdom, when a crime is committed, there are no lawyers to argue the case. The accused is simply thrown into the king's arena. The king sits high on his throne, the masses fill the galleries, and the prisoner stands in the center of the ring. Directly opposite him are two identical doors. If he opens the one, a hungry tiger, the fiercest and most cruel that can be found, springs upon him and tears him to pieces as a punishment for his guilt. If he opens the other, a lady, the most suitable to his years and station, steps forth, and he is immediately married to her as a reward for his innocence. It matters not if he is already married or loves another. The king's justice is absolute. It is the doctrine of chance. The tiger or the lady, death or marriage. The verdict is instantaneous, and it is irrevocable. Now consider the protagonist of our tragedy. He is a young courtier, possessing that dangerous combination of low station and high ambition. For this youth has committed a crime that, in the eyes of the king, is more heinous than treason or murder. He has dared to love the king's daughter. The princess is her father's child. Her soul is fervent, imperious, and intense. She loved this young man with an ardor that had enough of barbarism in it to make it exceedingly warm and strong. But their secret was discovered. The king did not hesitate. The youth was cast into prison, and a day was appointed for his trial in the arena. This was to be the grandest trial the kingdom had ever seen. The tiger cages were searched for the most relentless beast. The kingdom was scoured for the most beautiful maiden. But as the fateful day arrives, the story shifts its gaze from the man in the sand to the woman in the royal box. For the princess possesses something that no one else in the arena has. She possesses the secret. Through gold and the power of her will, she has discovered which door holds the horror and which holds the bride. And here lies the crucible of the narrative. The princess knows who the lady is. She is one of the fairest damsels of the court, a woman the princess has long suspected of admiring her lover. She has seen glances exchanged. She has seen the flush of a cheek. She hates this woman with all the intensity of her savage blood. She hates the idea of her lover walking into the arms of a rival, to be married before her very eyes, to live happily ever after, while she sits alone in her royal despair. But look at the alternative. If she saves him from the marriage, she condemns him to the tiger. She must watch the man she loves be torn asunder. She must hear his last shriek, see his blood stain the sand, and know that she sent him to that fate. The day arrives. The masses are gathered. The king is seated. The signal is given. The lover steps into the arena. He is tall, beautiful, and fair. The crowd hums with admiration and pity, but he does not look at the king. He does not look at the tiger's door or the lady's door. He turns his eyes to the royal box. He looks at the princess. He knows her nature. He knows she would not rest until she discovered the secret. His eyes ask her a silent, desperate question, plain as speech. Which? There is no time to lose. The tiger is pacing. The silence is deafening. Her soul burns with the combined fires of despair and jealousy. She has lost him, no matter what happens. But who shall have him? The rival she despises, or the silence of the grave? Her right arm lies on the cushioned parapet. She raises her hand. She makes a slight, quick movement toward the right. No one sees it but him. He turns. With a firm and rapid step, he walks across the empty space. Every heart stops beating. Every breath is held. The universe contracts to the latch of a single wooden door. He reaches out. He opens it. What happens next is a mystery that has divided the world. It is a puzzle that requires you to look not into the text, but into the mirror. To finish this story, you must decide what lived in the heart of that semi-barbaric princess. Close your eyes. Step onto the sand. The handle turns. The door creaks open. Listen. The Lady, or the Tiger, short story by Frank Richard Stockton. In the very olden time there lived a semi-barbaric king, whose ideas, though somewhat polished and sharpened by the progressiveness of distant Latin neighbors, were still large, florid, and untrammeled, as became the half of him which was barbaric. He was a man of exuberant fancy, and withal of an authority so irresistible that at his will he turned his varied fancies into facts. He was greatly given to self-communing, and when he and himself agreed upon anything, the thing was done. When every member of his domestic and political systems moved smoothly in its appointed course, his nature was bland and genial. But whenever there was a little hitch, and some of his orbs got out of their orbits, he was blander and more genial still, for nothing pleased him so much as to make the crooked straight and crush down uneven places. Among the borrowed notions by which his barbarism had become semified was that of the public arena, in which, by exhibitions of manly and beastly valor, the minds of his subjects were refined and cultured. But even here the exuberant and barbaric fancy asserted itself. The arena of the king was built, not to give the people an opportunity of hearing the rhapsodies of dying gladiators, nor to enable them to view the inevitable conclusion of a conflict between religious opinions and hungry jaws, but for purposes far better adapted to widen and develop the mental energies of the people. This vast amphitheater, with its encircling galleries, its mysterious vaults, and its unseen passages, was an agent of poetic justice, in which crime was punished, or virtue rewarded, by the decrees of an impartial and incorruptible chance. When a subject was accused of a crime of sufficient importance to interest the king, public notice was given that on an appointed day the fate of the accused person would be decided in the king's arena, a structure which well deserved its name, for, although its form and plan were borrowed from afar, its purpose emanated solely from the brain of this man, who, every barley corn a king, knew no tradition to which he owed more allegiance than pleased his fancy, and who engrafted on every adopted form of human thought and action the rich growth of his. When all the people had assembled in the galleries, and the king, surrounded by his court, sat high up on his throne of royal state, on one side of the arena, he gave a signal, a door beneath him opened, and the accused subject stepped out into the amphitheater. Directly opposite him, on the other side of the enclosed space, were two doors, exactly alike and side by side. It was the duty and the privilege of the person on trial to walk directly to these doors and open one of them. He could open either door he pleased. He was subject to no guidance or influence but that of the aforementioned impartial and incorruptible chance. If he opened the one, there came out of it a hungry tiger, the fiercest and most cruel that could be procured, which immediately sprang upon him and tore him to pieces as a punishment for his guilt. The moment that the case of the criminal was thus decided, doleful iron bells were clanged. Great wails went up from the hired mourners posted on the outer rim of the arena, and the vast audience, with bowed heads and downcast hearts, wended slowly their homeward way, mourning greatly that one so young and fair, or so old and respected, should have merited so dire a fate. But, if the accused person opened the other door, there came forth from it a lady, the most suitable to his years and station that his majesty could select among his fair subjects, and to this lady he was immediately married, as a reward of his innocence. It mattered not that he might already possess a wife and family, or that his affections might be engaged upon an object of his own selection. The king allowed no such subordinate arrangements to interfere with his great scheme of retribution and reward. The exercises, as in the other instance, took place immediately and in the arena. Another door opened beneath the king, and a priest, followed by a band of choristers and dancing maidens blowing joyous airs on golden horns and treading an epithalamic measure, advanced to where the pair stood, side by side, and the wedding was promptly and cheerily solemnized. Then the gay brass bells rang forth their merry peals, the people shouted glad hurrahs, and the innocent man, preceded by children strewing flowers on his path, led his bride to his home. This was the king's semi-barbaric method of administering justice. Its perfect fairness is obvious. The criminal could not know out of which door would come the lady. He opened either he pleased, without having the slightest idea whether, in the next instant, he was to be devoured or married. On some occasions, the tiger came out of one door, and on some out of the other. The decisions of this tribunal were not only fair, they were positively determinate. The accused person was instantly punished if he found himself guilty. And, if innocent, he was rewarded on the spot, whether he liked it or not. There was no escape from the judgments of the king's arena. The institution was a very popular one. When the people gathered together on one of the great trial days, they never knew whether they were to witness a bloody slaughter or a hilarious wedding. This element of uncertainty lent an interest to the occasion which it could not otherwise have attained. Thus the masses were entertained and pleased, and the thinking part of the community could bring no charge of unfairness against this plan, for did not the accused person have the whole matter in his own hands? This semi-barbaric king had a daughter as blooming as his most florid fancies, and with a soul as fervent and imperious as his own. As is usual in such cases, she was the apple of his eye, and was loved by him above all humanity. Among his courtiers was a young man of that fineness of blood and lowness of station common to the conventional heroes of romance who love royal maidens. This royal maiden was well satisfied with her lover, for he was handsome and brave to a degree unsurpassed in all this kingdom, and she loved him with an ardor that had enough of barbarism in it to make it exceedingly warm and strong. This love affair moved on happily for many months, until one day the king happened to discover its existence. He did not hesitate nor waver in regard to his duty in the premises. The youth was immediately cast into prison, and a day was appointed for his trial in the king's arena. This, of course, was an especially important occasion, and His Majesty, as well as all the people, was greatly interested in the workings and development of this trial. Never before had such a case occurred. Never before had a subject dared to love the daughter of the king. In after years such things became commonplace enough, but then they were in no slight degree novel and startling. The tiger cages of the kingdom were searched for the most savage and relentless beasts, from which the fiercest monster might be selected for the arena, and the ranks of maiden youth and beauty throughout the land were carefully surveyed by competent judges, in order that the young man might have a fitting bride in case fate did not determine for him a different destiny. Of course, everybody knew that the deed with which the accused was charged had been done. He had loved the princess, and neither he, she, nor anyone else thought of denying the fact. But the king would not think of allowing any fact of this kind to interfere with the workings of the tribunal, in which he took such great delight and satisfaction. No matter how the affair turned out, the youth would be disposed of, and the king would take an aesthetic pleasure in watching the course of events, which would determine whether or not the young man had done wrong in allowing himself to love the princess. The appointed day arrived. From far and near the people gathered, and thronged the great galleries of the arena, and crowds, unable to gain admittance, massed themselves against its outside walls. The king and his court were in their places, opposite the twin doors, those fateful portals, so terrible in their similarity. All was ready. The signal was given. A door beneath the royal party opened, and the lover of the princess walked into the arena. Tall, beautiful, fair, his appearance was greeted with a low hum of admiration and anxiety. Half the audience had not known so grand a youth had lived among them. No wonder the princess loved him. What a terrible thing for him to be there. As the youth advanced into the arena, he turned, as the custom was, to bow to the king, but he did not think at all of that royal personage. His eyes were fixed upon the princess, who sat to the right of her father. Had it not been for the moiety of barbarism in her nature, it is probable that lady would not have been there, but her intense and fervid soul would not allow her to be absent on an occasion in which she was so terribly interested. From the moment that the decree had gone forth that her lover should decide his fate in the king's arena, she had thought of nothing, night or day, but this great event and the various subjects connected with it. Possessed of more power, influence, and force of character than anyone who had ever before been interested in such a case, she had done what no other person had done. She had possessed herself of the secret of the doors. She knew in which of the two rooms that lay behind those doors stood the cage of the tiger, with its open front, and in which waited the lady. Through these thick doors, heavily curtained with skins on the inside, it was impossible that any noise or suggestion should come from within to the person who should approach to raise the latch of one of them. But gold, and the power of a woman's will, had brought the secret to the princess. And not only did she know in which room stood the lady ready to emerge, all blushing and radiant, should her door be opened, but she knew who the lady was. It was one of the fairest and loveliest of the damsels of the court, who had been selected as the reward of the accused youth, should he be proved innocent of the crime of aspiring to one so far above him, and the princess hated her. Often had she seen, or imagined that she had seen, this fair creature throwing glances of admiration upon the person of her lover, and sometimes she thought these glances were perceived, and even returned. Now and then she had seen them talking together. It was but for a moment or two, but much can be said in a brief space. It may have been on most unimportant topics, but how could she know that? The girl was lovely, but she had dared to raise her eyes to the loved one of the princess, and with all the intensity of the savage blood transmitted to her through long lines of holy barbaric ancestors, she hated the woman who blushed and trembled behind that silent door. When her lover turned and looked at her, and his eye met hers as she sat there, paler and whiter than anyone in the vast ocean of anxious faces about her, he saw, by that power of quick perception which is given to those whose souls are one, that she knew behind which door crouched the tiger, and behind which stood the lady. He had expected her to know it. He understood her nature, and his soul was assured that she would never rest until she had made plain to herself this thing, hidden to all other lookers-on, even to the king. The only hope for the youth in which there was any element of certainty was based upon the success of the princess in discovering this mystery. And the moment he looked upon her, he saw she had succeeded, as in his soul he knew she would succeed. Then it was that his quick and anxious glance asked the question, which? It was as plain to her as if he shouted it from where he stood. There was not an instant to be lost. The question was asked in a flash. It must be answered in another. Her right arm lay on the cushioned parapet before her. She raised her hand and made a slight, quick movement toward the right. No one but her lover saw her. Every eye but his was fixed on the man in the arena. He turned, and with a firm and rapid step, he walked across the empty space. Every heart stopped beating. Every breath was held. Every eye was fixed immovably upon that man. Without the slightest hesitation, he went to the door on the right and opened it. Now the point of the story is this. Did the tiger come out of that door, or did the lady? The more we reflect upon this question, the harder it is to answer. It involves a study of the human heart, which leads us through devious mazes of passion, out of which it is difficult to find our way. Think of it, fair reader, not as if the decision of the question depended upon yourself, but upon that hot-blooded, semi-barbaric princess, her soul at a white heat beneath the combined fires of despair and jealousy. She had lost him, but who should have him? How often, in her waking hours and in her dreams, had she started in wild horror and covered her face with her hands as she thought of her lover opening the door on the other side of which waited the cruel fangs of the tiger. But how much oftener had she seen him at the other door? How in her grievous reveries had she gnashed her teeth and torn her hair when she saw his start of rapturous delight as he opened the door of the lady? How her soul had burned in agony when she had seen him rush to meet that woman with her flushing cheek and sparkling eye of triumph, when she had seen him lead her forth, his whole frame kindled with the joy of recovered life, when she had heard the glad shouts from the multitude and the wild ringing of the happy bells, when she had seen the priest with his joyous followers advance to the couple and make them man and wife before her very eyes, and when she had seen them walk away together upon their path of flowers, followed by the tremendous shouts of the hilarious multitude, in which her one despairing shriek was lost, and would it not be better for him to die at once, and go to wait for her in the blessed regions of semi-barbaric futurity? And yet, that awful tiger, those shrieks, that blood, her decision had been indicated in an instant, but it had been made after days and nights of anguished deliberation. She had known she would be asked. She had decided what she would answer, and, without the slightest hesitation, she had moved her hand to the right. The question of her decision is one not to be lightly considered, and it is not for me to presume to set myself up as the one person able to answer it. And so I leave it with all of you. Which came out of the open door, the lady or the tiger? When the final word of Frank Stockton's story lands, it does not land with a thud, but with a lingering, uncomfortable echo. The door opens. The narrative cuts to black. And we, the audience, are left sitting in the deafening silence of the arena. It is a silence that has frustrated, fascinated, and tormented readers for nearly a century and a half. Most short stories are designed to take us from ignorance to knowledge. We start with a question and end with an answer. The lady, or the tiger, does the exact opposite. It takes us from a state of observational distance and drops us into a pit of absolute moral ambiguity. The feeling it leaves is not satisfaction. It is a profound, itching anxiety. Why does this story haunt us? It is because the central conflict is not, as it first appears, man versus beast, or even love versus death. The invisible monster in this story is projection. The genius of Stockton's trap is that the story has no ending until you provide one. The text is a mirror. If you believe the lady came out, you are likely an optimist, a romantic, or perhaps someone who believes in the redemptive power of sacrifice. If you believe the tiger emerged, you may be a cynic, a realist, or someone who understands the destructive nature of possessive passion. The central philosophical conflict here is the terrifying realization that we cannot know the heart of another because we barely know our own. We are asked to judge the soul of the princess, but in doing so, we are forced to put ourselves in her seat. The invisible monster is the realization that civilization is a fragile mask, and beneath it, we are all capable of making the right hand signal for the wrong reasons. To understand the weight of the princess's choice, we must decode the world Stockton built. It is not a generic fairy tale setting, it is a specific psychological landscape. Let us look first at the king's semi-barbarism. Stockton uses this term repeatedly. The king is not a mindless savage. He has been influenced by distant Latin neighbors. He has polished ideas and organized systems. This semi-barbarism is a powerful symbol for the human condition itself. We are creatures of the ID wrapped in the ego. We build courthouses, we write laws, we wear suits. But our fundamental desires, sex, violence, dominance, are merely refined, not removed. The king's arena is the ultimate symbol of this. It is a civilized structure built for a barbaric purpose. It represents how society attempts to sterilize chaos. We try to put chance into a box and call it justice. Then, consider the twin doors. In literature, a door usually represents a transition or a discovery. Here, the doors represent the binary fallacy. The story presents a world where there are only two outcomes: absolute bliss or absolute destruction. There is no middle ground. There is no negotiation. This mirrors the anxiety of the human mind under stress. When we are panicked, our thinking becomes black and white. We convince ourselves that if we don't get exactly what we want, the lady, we will be destroyed. The tiger. But the tragedy of the doors is that for the princess, both doors are the tiger. If the tiger comes out, her lover dies, and she loses him to the grave. If the lady comes out, her lover marries a woman she hates, and she loses him to a rival. The doors are a lie. They promise a difference between good and bad. But for the decision maker, both doors lead to loss. The setting is a trap not just for the accused, but for the one who holds the power. While the young man is the one in the arena, he is merely a prop. The true protagonist and the subject of our psychoanalysis is the princess. Stockton describes her as having a soul as fervent and imperious as her father's. She is the idea of the story, pure, unfiltered emotion. But let's look closer at her internal state using the lens of the shadow self. The princess loves the young man, yes. But what kind of love is it? It is a possessive, narcissistic love. She has risked everything for him, but notice her reaction to the other woman, the lady behind the door. Stockton writes that the princess has seen glances between them. She has seen the lady blushing. Her jealousy is described as savage blood transmitted to her through long lines of wholly barbaric ancestors. This is where the concept of cognitive dissonance tears her apart. On one hand, she has the civilized, romantic ideal. If you love someone, let them go. Save his life, even if he isn't yours. This is the superego talking. On the other hand, she has the primal, semi-barbaric drive. If I cannot have him, no one can. This is the shadow. Why might she choose the tiger? Because in death, he belongs to her forever. In death, he waits for her in the, quote, blessed regions of semi-barbaric futurity. If she chooses the lady, she has to watch the wedding. She has to witness his rapturous delight at seeing another woman. For a narcissist, The humiliation of seeing their lover happy with someone else is a pain sharper than grief. We pity her because she is trapped in a no-win scenario. But we fear her because she represents the part of us that would rather destroy a beautiful thing than see someone else enjoy it. The movement of her hand to the right was instant, but the calculation was an eternity of agony. She is the ultimate victim of her father's system, forced to play God when she is all too human. It is important to understand that Frank Stockton did not intend to write a torture device for high school English students. He was a humorist, a man of wit. He wrote The Lady, or the Tiger, for a party as a playful intellectual puzzle. However, the story tapped into something much deeper than he anticipated. When it was published in the Century magazine in 1882, the reaction was explosive. Stockton was bombarded with letters. People demanded the answer. They argued at dinner parties. They insulted him. Why? Because Stockton accidentally touched a raw nerve of the Victorian era. This was a time of strict social order, of repressed emotions, where the barbaric was strictly hidden behind the civilized. By refusing to give an answer, Stockton denied the audience the moral closure they felt entitled to. In a way, Stockton himself is the king. He built the arena, the story. He placed the characters inside, and then he sat back to watch the chaos. But unlike the king, who used the arena to, quote, crush down uneven places, Stockton used it to expose them. He admitted later in life that he didn't know the answer himself. The story ceased to belong to him the moment he wrote it. It became a public test. By refusing to answer, he forces us to confront the fact that authors are not gods. They cannot save us from the ambiguity of their art. The pain of the story is the pain of realizing that there is no authority figure coming to tell us what is right and what is wrong. We are on our own. So why are we still talking about this Victorian fable in 2025? Why does a story about tigers and arenas matter in an age of AI and digital disconnect? It matters because we are living in the age of agony over choice. We are the most choice-rich society in history, yet we are paralyzed. We stand in the arena every day. We swipe left or right. We choose this career or that one. We engage or we ghost. But the deeper relevance lies in our relationship with uncertainty. We live in a world of instant information. If we want to know the weather, the stock price, or the ending of a movie, we check our phones. We have become allergic to the unknown. We demand answers. We demand closure. The Lady, or the Tiger, is a radical act of resistance against closure. It reminds us that some of the most important questions in life. Does she love me? Did I make the right choice? Is there meaning in this suffering? Do not have answers at the back of the book. The story suggests that who we are is defined by what we imagine behind the door. If you live in a world where you constantly expect the tiger, betrayal, failure, pain, you will move through life with defensive cruelty. If you live expecting the Lady, hope, redemption, love, you leave yourself open to being hurt, but also to being saved. The semi-barbaric princess is not a villain. She is us. She is every moment we let jealousy override empathy. She is every moment we choose our own comfort over another's survival. So, I leave you with this. Do not ask what came out of the door in the story. That is irrelevant. Ask yourself this. When you close your eyes and picture the scene, which door did you want her to open? And what does that desire whisper about the semi-barbaric nature of your own soul?